Hi everybody, it's Cash. Welcome back. Thank you very much for joining me. Today I want to share with you the transition pictures I did for St. Thomas Aquinas. He was a Catholic philosopher, theologian, who died in the year 1274 at the age of 49-ish of head trauma. Quite remarkable man, and he had some of the most moving transition pictures I have ever seen. He actually found the secret to life. I don't know whether he found it before he died or whether he experienced it in the process of transition, but he found out what the secret was to life, and I will share that with you. I also did one of our time travel experiments going back to the 13th century, targeting Thomas Aquinas to see if I could show up in the same year, the same day, preferably. And that produced some absolutely fascinating results as well. But Thomas Aquinas pursued what's known as natural theology. There are two kinds of theology. There's revealed theology, whereby you come to know God through the Bible and other holy texts. And then there's natural theology, which is a more scientific, down-to-earth approach that says, basically, look around you. Where do you see the evidence of God? You see it in nature. You see it in logical argument. For example, everything is caused by something else. Everything in the world is caused by something else. But ultimately, there has to be a first cause, and that is God. That kind of argument. It was put forward originally by Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, who lived 1,500 years before Thomas Aquinas. But Aquinas followed that and was a man of the people. He just believed in living a down-to-earth life. He wanted from a very early age to be a Dominican friar, something that his family opposed wholeheartedly to the extent that they locked him in the house. He became a prisoner in his own home. They just wouldn't let him go off and become a Dominican friar. But realistically, how long can you keep someone trapped in their home? And so they devised a way for him to escape, ultimately, and away he went. He studied in Paris and then later on became a teacher of theology in Paris. Left, came back, and ended his career in Paris. During his life, he had some remarkable visions, mystical experiences that cannot be in any way explained. Became so ecstatic during these meetings with angels or conferences with God or whatever it was that he would levitate off the ground. People saw him levitate. And these epiphanous experiences, meeting angels and talking to God and so on, changed his entire view of life. In 1274, he was on his way to a conference in Lyon, riding a donkey, when he hit a tree, a low-hanging bough, and it knocked him off backwards and caused some kind of blood clot in his head. And although he recovered on the face of it, actually he didn't really, and ultimately he died. Which is remarkable because I didn't know any of that before I did the pictures, and yet the transition pictures begin that way. He was falling backwards as if he had fallen off a quayside into the ocean. When he landed in the water, he lay on the surface for a while, just staring up at the sky. So although on the face of it he may have seemed to have been recovering at the time, he really wasn't at all. He must have been left dizzy, disoriented, and not the same guy as he had been before, and eventually it killed him. But before I get to that, I would like to tell you what happened when I ran a little experiment in time travel to see this time if I could target a specific year and a specific person. The year I chose was 1256, when Thomas Aquinas was teaching in Paris. By my estimation, that makes him around 30 years old, possibly, because he died in 1274. But that's what I decided to do, but with no more parameters than that. I simply said I'd like to go to 1256, Paris, and meet Thomas Aquinas to see what happened. When I went into that energy, I was walking initially along a dark corridor. And it was dark because there were no windows. There was a light at the end of the corridor somewhere, but I guess people were used to walking in the dark because there weren't lights and stuff. There were people walking past me. Some of them were in very plain smocks or something, a bit like muumuus, very, very plain. But occasionally one or two people would walk past with elaborately stitched, I don't even know what they would be called, blouses or jerkins, or what they call that. But occasionally. But most people walking around were in these loose-fitting muumuu type things. And I went unacknowledged. Not ignored, but anonymous. Nobody really knew who I was. I wasn't significant in any way. And they all walked past me in this darkened corridor, most of them going that way. I carried on, and the corridor did this weird thing. It turned to the right, and then it turned to the left, and it led out into a grassy quadrangle. Now, a word of caution about this, because when I was in France last year, I did go to a place that was not dissimilar to this. No connection whatsoever with it, but I do worry sometimes that there's a bleeding through of images, and I go, oh, yeah, it's that. And actually, it's some place I really did see. But it was just similar to that, I think. It had these windy corridors, and the light was coming in from the quadrangle. Grass in a rectangular shape, and then there was some kind of colonnade. And I could walk along this stone colonnade to a doorway at the end. No door on it. That sometimes happens in these pictures. There was no door on it. And when I got outside this building, whatever this building was, there was a bit of a steep slope, grassy slope, and I walked across, and ahead of me was a bridge. So there was some kind of river, stream or something to my left, and I walked onto this bridge, leaving this building, whatever that was, behind. Weirdly, it looked old, but I don't think it was old. I got the feeling that they'd basically picked a very dark stone for it, and as a result, it just looked kind of old and dirty, but it wasn't. It was relatively new. And I walked up onto this bridge, and the bridge was one of those pretty ancient things that was made of big beams, timber, stretched across the stream or river, but it could easily burn down if somebody set fire to it. I think somebody was even working on it over on the far side or something, but it was a wooden bridge made of very solid beams. And I remember walking across, and there was a man on a horse, a white horse, and he was crossing the bridge, but at some point he turned his horse towards me, and it made a couple of steps in my direction. And for some reason that I honestly can't explain, I felt mild palpitations like, oh no. I don't think there was anything particularly suspicious, but maybe people at that time who were on horses, people in authority perhaps, or people who were rich, could do things to you if they wanted to. And if they approach you, it was like a warning sign of, oh, what have I done? What have I done wrong? It wasn't dangerous. It was just like alarming. Oh, no, why me? That kind of feeling. And I crossed over the bridge, and there was another building on that side of the river or stream. And that was where I was walking to. This one was newer. This one looked newer, but simply because it was made of a lighter stone. And I went in through the doorway, and at the end of this hallway, there was another very large room that had, they looked like church pews in it, but it wasn't a church. And there were lots of people sitting in these pews, and at the front there were various, I'll say, authority figures moving around. and everybody in the pews was waiting for the authority figures to say something. It was a raised platform. And I remember inching along a pew and sitting right at the very back and watching this happen. I wouldn't absolutely swear to this because it does seem almost too impossible to imagine, but it felt as though Thomas Aquinas was on the platform giving a talk. I wouldn't absolutely swear to it, but somebody was giving a talk. And I had, when I set the parameters of this time travel episode, I had targeted Thomas Aquinas, but he was one of several people on the raised platform. And afterwards, I thought, I will go and meet him. And I walked down and climbed onto the platform and said hello. And all I remember now from that was how soft his features were, how unperturbed, untroubled by concerns. And that was my last image in my head. It was a very untroubled visage, somebody who felt at peace with life. That's what that felt like. He was canonized in 1323 by the Pope, obviously, and since then has become one of the leading figures in Catholicism. In fact, I don't think you can become a priest these days unless you have studied the written works of Thomas Aquinas. And so I became very, very interested in what happened to him after death, mainly because in the Daily Mail recently, they showed a picture of him. What scientists have done is they've got Thomas Aquinas' original skull, and using AI, they've reconstructed it to give us an idea of what he looked like. Which is so interesting because, yes, I can imagine that face as reconstructed being the face that I looked at in the time travel pictures. It's quite remarkable, actually. But I went into his energy again for his transition. And these pictures were even more remarkable to me because they revealed something about Thomas Aquinas that we can never get simply from history books. And as I said, when I went into the energy initially, he was falling backwards off what looked like a quayside into the ocean, where he lay staring up at the sky. So even though he may have looked like he was recovering, and it was just a bruise on his head, he was seriously injured and gradually dying. He may have been woozy, he may have had double vision, he may have felt really strange and had headaches and so on, but he lay there and became numb. I felt myself becoming gradually numb to events. And I lay there. I have no idea how long he lasted after he had the accident, but I lay there feeling numb. And then finally, you know, when a fisherman casts a line and he waits and waits, and then suddenly a fish takes the bait and it bobs down into the water and then they start reeling it in. It had that feeling to it, as though Thomas Aquinas was suddenly yanked downwards into the depths of the ocean. And even then, he was like, okay, that's fine. You don't drown in the pictures, but it had that sort of feeling to it. He went down and down and down in a dream state, really. The light that he was looking at from above the ocean surface got dimmer and dimmer and dimmer, and he was okay with that. He just observed it and went away and away and away. And he landed in that cave that I always see. But it was like an explosion of water, as though he'd taken the ocean with him. When I see water in that cave, it usually relates to how much the person is missed and mourned when they die. And I have a feeling, therefore, that he was very, very heavily mourned. This guy, in his lifetime, was regarded as something incredibly special. And he lay in the water for quite a time, just absorbing this environment. Obviously, it's not real, it's metaphorical, but you get the idea. His consciousness was adapting to the idea of dying, and it didn't perturb him one bit. I tried to look through his symbolic eyes, and everything was blurry. This could relate to his injury, I suppose, that at the end he was having blurred vision and so on. But it also seemed like he wasn't terribly focused on the process. He seemed blissfully in tune. They naturally drawn up that tunnel, I always see, the metaphorical tunnel, and that was not an issue. Eventually it was like, okay, let's go. And I saw big steps up, halfway up the tunnel. Really big steps that other people in their transition pictures would have to climb. Lessons he still had to learn about his mortal life. And if he learnt them, fine, but he just drifted over them in this blissful, almost blurry state. So when I looked at his actual pictures, he was climbing over these steps, trying to mount them and get over them, so he went through that. But at his consciousness level, he was just blissfully uncaring about it all. He knew where he was going. This was pure faith in action. It's as if the walls were aglow with the light of the divine. This man was prepared to live the message, let go and let God. I felt a tingle, like a thrill, as I experienced this. I've never experienced anything like it before. He seemed to be pedaling in the air, like riding an invisible bike. Just gently, no rush. And I really believe that the visions he had on the mortal side in his lifetime were preparing him for this. Whatever he saw, whatever he felt, whatever he experienced, changed his perspective in a radical way. When he got to this point of his transition, he was already one with God, completely in sync with that energy. And when he got to the cave at the top of the tunnel with the light in it, that I always see, the dome, he was ready to go. And I realized that he had discovered something absolutely fundamental to life. The secret that people are looking for was in Thomas Aquinas' pictures. It's all about alignment. That's all we're trying to do, is get our ego out of the way and put our divine selves that are on the inside in alignment with the greater cosmic divine intelligence. That's all we have to do. But our egos get in the way, obviously. And that's what we deal with on our mortal side. Remember when I did pictures for grace? And I'd always thought that grace was about blessing the food, asking God to bless the food and thanking God for providing it, that kind of thing. But actually what we discovered was that grace was about aligning our digestive system with the properties of the food so that it went down through our system more easily and nourished and nurtured us in the best possible way. That was grace. And when I was in France and did pictures for prayer, and realized that prayer is not about asking some outside agency to look after us or bless us. And so it's not about worship and singing hymns and so on. Prayer is about aligning with divine intelligence, feeling our spark of the divine that's on the inside completely in sync with God. No matter what obstacles were presented to him during his crossover, he was able to ride over them as if pedaling an invisible bike, blissfully unaware of anything other than God's divine blessing. And when he got to the light at the top of the tunnel, the dome of light, it was like butter melting in a warm pan. He just dissolved into the light because he already was light. We are already light. But because of ego concerns, we don't make ourselves light enough to lift. Thomas Aquinas realized that no matter what happened to him in terms of ego, he would be okay because he was aligned with divine intelligence and that perfect energy. But by letting everything go, Thomas Aquinas was able to ascend so easily. And it made me, on the night I did these pictures, quite teary. I remember sitting there thinking, wow, that's it. That's the secret of life. Everybody's searching, everybody's looking. Everybody's trying a million different modalities and stuff to somehow sort themselves out on the mortal side. Thomas Aquinas, in the 13th century, had figured this out. Or he had a vision that taught him this. But he found out what the secret of life was. It's about alignment. And when I went into his energy at the end and just into his consciousness to see what he was seeing, it was nothing but light. And the feelings were nothing but bliss. And it made me cry because I thought, this is it. This is what we're all looking for. And the feeling was one of utter relaxation. It was like being on morphine, which just leaves you kind of numb in one way, but also feeling absolutely uninhibitedly joyous. He was in a trance state of total vulnerability and submission to all that is. Take me. I am yours. I am you. I am one with you. I'm not really part of any kind of faith with a capital F, but if that's what Catholicism is about, if that's what they're aiming for, I would like to become a Catholic, please. I'd like help with this. Quite remarkable. I don't know whether Catholics today follow Thomas Aquinas in spirit as opposed to his words and stuff, because, people get very, very caught up in dogma and doctrine and so on, and they think they understand, but they're really just memorizing ideas and words. But Thomas Aquinas was living it. Thomas Aquinas was divine energy incorporated into human form. Absolutely remarkable. And when he went, even though it was centuries ago now, I felt like the human race had lost somebody very, very important, somebody pivotal, somebody who knew the answers. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. And I'll see you soon. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye-bye.